going to be, actually it's 9 a.m. now. Well, Ted, I think that you're asking which is Xi Yang Yang and which is Le Rong Grong. I don't know. Maybe somebody in the room knows. But those of you who are unfamiliar, MOQ has a tradition during its meetings of having a local sports mascot. I had a lot of trouble on at least Google Images finding pictures of Shenzhen sports mascots, but this is from the national games that were here a few years ago. It's 9 a.m. Welcome to Media Over QUIC. My name is Martin Duke. I'm one of the chairs. Magnus had an urgent matter in Stockholm he had to attend to, so I believe he's on an airplane right now, so I will be flying solo today. This meeting is being recorded, as always. This is the IETF Note Well. You've probably seen it this week already several times, but it covers the intellectual property implications of you being here, as well as outlining the code of conduct expectations for participants. Please take a look at it if you have not done so already. This is today's agenda. We're hearing complaints about the audio. Oh yeah, that was very bad. Sorry about not being able to hear me a moment ago. I just talked about the Note Well and did the other introductory stuff. This is today's agenda. We loaded all the security issues into Tuesday's session because CFRG is right now, and we didn't think we'd get much security participation today. Here's what we're going to go through. Mostly, we're going to cover some of the other drafts that are out there in the working group, and then we're going to give about 30 minutes to the editors to work on MOQ issues. Would anyone like to bash this agenda? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to hand it over to Mike English, who will talk about the hackathon.
Apologies, one moment. my lights automatically turned off because I'm 12 hours off. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, so Mike English, Cloudflare. Hackathon report this time will be brief. There was some hackathon activity. Things are mainly focused right now on kind of getting things into the automated interop test runner. And so we're still kind of working through some issues with making sure that all the Docker images can build and the right versions are assigned to the right implementations and things like that. Let me very briefly see if I can share my screen. I don't know where I'm able to select what to share here.
Oh, that's the problem.
Oh.
Okay. I just now understood the interface. Magnus always did that. Go ahead, Mike.
Gotcha. Okay. One moment. Let me share this Chrome tab. Okay, so this is a current view of the interop test runner. So englishm.github.io/mock-interop-runner will bring you to the top level page where you can see a variety of test runs. And then within those, you can see different relay implementations matched up with different client implementations and the results of those pairings. It's designed to be aware of what versions each implementation supports. And you can see these little superscripts indicating the expected version that would have been negotiated. So you can see we have kind of mixed results here right now. Some of this is not actual failures of the MOQ protocol, so much as test runner issues that we're still kind of working out the kinks for. Each of these will bring you, if you go to one of these results, you can see detailed log.
Can you zoom in a little, Mike? That's completely illegible. Uh-oh.
How far do you want me to zoom in?
That's a little better. Not great, but better.
Yeah, so this is what the test results look like. You can see we have some defined test cases. The output is formatted. So there's kind of a standard output that a test client supports. And each of these test cases is defined as is defined as a specification that lives in the repository. So right now we just have a handful of specifications for setup, exchange, making an announcement, expecting to receive a subscribe error if a track does not exist, etc. And we intend to grow this list. So as people come up with additional tests that they would like to perform, we can add more specifications and test clients can implement those specifications. That way we have a diversity of implementations implementing the same behavior so that we can kind of have the spec be the guiding principle and implementations of the specification yielding results in interop. Any questions?
I have one. I know that we talked about maybe sitting on draft 16 for a while. I've heard some feedback that maybe we wanted to get all the very significant changes in 17 and 18 implemented sooner rather than later. I don't know how your thinking's evolved on that, or if anyone would like to approach the mic to state an opinion about how long we sit on 16, either as an implementer or not.
Yeah, I would love to hear feedback on that.
Alan, go ahead.
Okay, maybe you can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay, now you can see me. There we go. Okay. Here I am. Yeah, my thought is so 17 is out. Some people have implemented it. There's a lot there, especially if you're going to try to support both versions in one implementation, because it's quite different. So, I mean, I know I've started poking around at it. In terms of when we roll to like actually ask everyone to move the interop target, my thinking is we'll do that in 18, which I'm targeting in about 4 weeks before the June interim. So like about 2 months from now. And I kind of hope that like whatever remaining wire image shuffling that we're planning to do, we'll finish. And so after 18, like, you know, people, if you look at the drafts that are coming in that people want to merge into the core, a lot of them are adding new parameters and adding new relay behaviors, but are not changing like sort of the core framing and stuff. So anyway, that's my thinking. So we'll move to 18 starting 8 weeks from now and skip 17, except for people who want to.
Okay, Mike, can you start a conversation on the list about this? But what I'm hearing is maybe we target 18 for London, the London interop. But again, can you take the action item to get a discussion on the list going?
Yep, I will do that. I see in the chat also Victor expressing a preference for 17/18 sooner, since supporting 16 and 17 is a lot of pain. We happen to be, so as you can see, we have 2 implementations here, MOQ-RS and MOQ-RS draft 16. So we actually make a hard break each time. But I know that some implementations support multiple versions at once, and the changes between some of these drafts are significant to kind of carry both at once. I see +1 for 18 in London. I'll take it to the list and we'll get more input.
Thank you, Mike. Alrighty, moving on. Next up is Minghui, who's going to talk about, pardon me, Will, who's going to talk about MSF and CMSF. Yes.
Is it mic test? Okay. Bring the slides up. Oh. So thank you. Good morning, Will Law Akamai. I'm going to cover a very brief and fast update on our streaming formats, MSF and CMSF. So if you're one of the people wondering alone, how am I going to actually stream video over MOQ transport? You're not alone. We held a brainstorming meeting in Boulder in the United States of people who were interested in MSF and CMSF to raise a lot of issues, which we bring back to IETF. It was very successful. So there are a lot of people there. Some are in the room today. But I just encourage you to join this community of people who are interested in MSF and CMSF, because the more input we get, the better it is. And as a consequence of this meeting, we've had a flurry of PRs. And I want to particularly call out Suhas, who's contributed a lot to MSF in the last 2 months. Thank you, Suhas. So let's go through some of the major changes. The first one is our rename is complete. So you may have heard of the streaming format referred to as WARP. That has now been changed to MSF, which formally stands for MOQT streaming format. It is what the name on the can is what's inside, but we mostly just call this MSF. And then what used to be called CARP, which is the CMAF compliant MOQT streaming format, is now called CMSF. And I'll only refer to them by their acronyms going forward. And remember that CMSF is basically everything that's inside MSF with the addition of CMAF support. One of the things we merged was a take on the URL format. We're still debating this, but at the Boulder interim, we decided to go with a fragment-based scheme, which I'm describing here. And this is being done in parallel. These are not my latest slides, unfortunately, because anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The MOQT Alan presented yesterday. This is probably going to be our schema, and the portion in blue of the URL is transferred over to the server. The fragment is intended for the client, and it communicates the namespace and the name that it's going to connect. And in our case, we mostly want to connect to a catalog, so we can describe the catalog there. And we also, within MSF, define a key value schema for the fragment so that we can pass additional key value pairs or parameters, fragment parameters, to the client. And some of these are predefined. The table in the bottom right shows some of the parameters that we've defined so that you can identify a subclip in your content. Just yesterday or the day before, Alan proposed that the fragment has a prefix that identifies the streaming format. So the fragment would be #MSF:. I quite like this idea. I'll support it, and hopefully we can move forward with that. And we have a pretty universal descriptor then. You can look at any URL and you can know what streaming format it represents. We also added support for variable substitution. This is pretty important. We want our catalogs to be cacheable in a relay. If we have 1 million people watching a stream, we want to give them all the same catalog, but at the same time, we want to give them custom advertising. So how would we do that? And one of the ways we do that is we can put key value parameters in our fragment. So the URL that is vended by the content management system will generate unique IDs for every user. And these can then be easily substituted into the catalog. So we use %character as the designator of our variable substitution, and we replace them in just prior to passing the catalog. And this, I think, gives us a flexibility to support customization, but at the same time, allowing us to cache the catalogs in our edge relays. We're also supporting an encryption scheme. This is MOQ secure objects. I referenced there. It's a draft. And this is not DRM, right? This is end-to-end encryption of MOQ objects. So if you don't want your distribution provider being able to view or read your content, you want to encrypt it. And it's very simply in the catalog on the right-hand side in yellow, we see some new keys that have been added to each of the track descriptors in order to communicate secure objects and the information that's necessary for the client to decrypt them. We've also defined a template for the media timeline track. So as a reminder, the media timeline is a description of the history in a live stream. So if you only want to play the live edge of a live stream, you don't care about the media timeline track and you never subscribe to it. But if you're a client, say it's a sports game and you want to scrub back into the past, you need to understand which groups and IDs or media time to go to. So we defined a very simple JSON structure, which the original publisher produces as it's encoding the audio and the video. But it can get quite verbose, right? It's an example shown on the right. For the use case of fixed duration groups, which are quite common in many distributions, we can apply a very simple compression scheme and collapse that timeline JSON list into a single template, which is shown on the left. So the template on the left is equivalent to the data on the right, and it takes advantage of the fact that we have fixed duration GOPs and fixed duration groups. But I think this will be a use case that's quite common, and now we have an efficient way of describing it. Now I'm getting into some PRs that are still open for discussion. They have not been merged. And I don't think we have enough time in this talk to actually debate these. There's some topics, but I just want to highlight them so you can go to the issue and add your opinion. The first one is what's called zapping, right? But the bigger picture here is we want to be able to start a stream very quickly and also switch in and out of that track very quickly in order to support stable playback at very low latency. One way to do that is to produce two variants of every track, one that has more dense keyframes than the other one. So A has a keyframe every 3 objects, and in B, it's every 6 objects. And it turns out that we can, with a single number, which is essentially the number of objects between keyframes, and a simple formula, which is described here, we call this the keyframe spacing parameter. The client can then figure out how to jump between the 2 tracks. And this allows it to start quickly and also switch out of trouble if it needs to. The downside of this schema is you've got 2 tracks for every track that you would have without it. But I think for streams that are being viewed by lots of people, having actually 2 egress streams is a de minimis consequence of having much faster join times and switch times. So please look at this PR, and if you like it, you can comment. Another one is PR 121, publishing tracks for logs and metrics. So the beautiful thing with MOQ, it's a bidirectional protocol, right? We always think of using it as the player is just subscribing to audio and video content, but the player can also publish logs and it can publish QoE data, which today we typically beacon out to a third party. But now in our catalog, we can tell every client, I want you to publish tracks yourself. And we can tell it the namespace and the name that it should publish to. We can tell it the format it should produce, such as a MOQ metrics track. And we can even give it a token that it can use to give it permission to publish this into the network. So there's examples shown on the right to show publishing both MOQ logs and MOQ metrics. And I think this will be a nice differentiator for MOQ media compared to segmented adaptive media where we have to beacon out through a different return path. Another PR for discussion 141, adding support for init tracks. So we try to simplify our communication of the initialization data that the client needs to start decoding the content by just putting it as base 64 and sticking it directly into catalog. And this works. However, it works as long as it's static for the life of the stream. But use cases were introduced saying, hey, in the middle of say a long-running stream, we want to change the size. We need to supply a different init data. And for that purpose, we can use a track. And it's very simple. The client subscribes to the init tracks, and it can get the init at the beginning. And then if you want to change it or update it at an arbitrary time, you get the new data in that track. And there's a mechanism shown on the right. We can just declare the init track as one of the tracks, and then we can reference it in another track that will use it for initialization. I see Mo for a clarifying question.
Not clarifying, but LOC has a mechanism to do the parameter set updates as well.
Oh.
Without catalog. As a property, track property or object property.
Okay, very cool, thank you. Yeah, we should actually look at, do we want init data supplied as a track or even object property? Because that would allow us to inject it at certain points. Okay, so that's a good idea. So maybe can you comment on 141 and just say, I'm not saying we shouldn't have init tracks, it's just we might want init tracks and init in the catalog and properties, and they all work. Okay, another PR 133. We want to add standards that are highly common in media, which is SCUDY 35 markers for ad insertion availability, as well as embedded captions, 608, 708, as well as external captions, right? IMSC1 and WebVTT. So the first thing we've done here is a proposal for transmission of SCUDY 35 data. So we have a track definition on the left-hand side in yellow that say, hey, I'm a SCUDY 35 track. And the nice thing is with MOQ, we can decouple the transmission of this data from the audio and video data. We use the depends attribute to link this SCUDY 35 to the tracks that it's referencing. And on the right-hand side is a proposed payload. We have an event timeline structure, and this is SCUDY 35 using the event timeline structure. I think it's a very neat and easy to understand scheme, and hopefully we can bring this to fruition. This is part of 133. The next thing we're looking at is out-of-band captions. How do we transmit WebVTT and IMSC1? Question is, do we still want both, or can we just standardize on IMSC1? On the right, again, we have a proposal for how we would map WebVTT data to our event timeline payload construct.
So we're under 5 minutes.
Yeah,
I'm leave time for discussion.
Okay. And then the last of this data is embedded captions 608, 708. So you see in the track description on the right-hand side, we have an accessibility field. Within that, we have a schema that says this is 608, and then we've got some value attributes for that schema. This is extensible for other types of accessibility as well, because we do need to be compliant with accessibility requirements for broadcast media. We've also have another PR 118, again, thanks to Suhas. This is for how do we communicate the requirement for auth info. We have two schemes that we support, Privacy Pass and Common Access Token. And how can we tell the player, hey, you need to supply one of these tokens for this track? That's a very simple scheme. We have a key called auth info, and inside that we have enumerated fields, and they can either be cat or Privacy Pass. And then I'm using the variable substitution to actually define the token that the player should use when it subscribes to this track. I think this is a pretty simple scheme. Please comment on 118. And that was the end. I'm actually 3 minutes early. Are there any questions? I can't see the online queue, but.
Benjamin? You're muted, Benjamin. Although it doesn't look like MeetEcho is muting you, so I think it's a different audio issue. Why don't you go while Benjamin figures out his audio?
Yeah. So my question is about the pub track or the log and the metrics.
Yep.
I want to clarify the purpose of this track is just for recording the logging information, or it's for the server-based ABR, because
it's not for ABR. The idea here was that if I have a player that's having a problem, for example, I can instruct the player to start sending me its logs because I want to debug its performance. I don't envision most distribution schemes want to get logs all the time from players. And maybe we have a scheme where the verbosity is adjusted so the player only sends error logs to a central collector so that you can monitor a fleet of players and know which ones are having errors. That would be an example of the logging, but it's flexible, and maybe we should define different types of log and the conditions under which we might want to report data from the player.
Okay, thank you.
Benjamin, you want to try again?
Hi. Okay, so can we go to slide 14?
Yeah. Well,
so on slide 14, you were talking about authorization.
Yeah.
I find this a little puzzling. This is related to a discussion that came up in the last session, but I think I don't really understand the idea of authorizing to receive a track. The track can be encrypted. And if you want to authorize people to receive it, you can just give them the keys or not to decrypt it, right? I think that what we're authorizing here is not not the content of the track, which can't really be controlled. It can be copied. So I think what we're authorizing here is actually access to the relay network.
We're
And that's
authorizing access to the subscription message. So the client can connect to a MOQ server, but then what can it do once it's connected? And we want to constrain what it can subscribe to. So certain tracks will have requirements that you must pass a token that gives you permission to even request it to subscribe to it. The content's not encrypted, but we're just controlling access to it from the client.
So
access control token.
I want to understand what it is that we're controlling access to and why. It sounds like maybe the answer is that we're controlling access to the resources required to redistribute that track, and that we need to know who to bill for that. If there is one relay with serving multiple customers.
All right, we're going to have to take this offline.
Okay. Yeah, Benjamin messaged me. The use case here is basically CDNs and content distribution, where you have a large edge and you don't want to have uncontrolled access to that CDN edge. You want to hand tokens to people who have permission to come and request the asset from the distribution network.
Right. So conventionally in a modern
guys,
CDN,
nope, take it offline. Take it offline. Ciao. Briefly, please.
I saw the video init track added, and seems tracks the first class citizen in the same MSF. And a question is, are there any principles for us to decide when to add new tracks to MSF and CMSF?
So I just want to understand the question. When do we add new tracks to the catalog or to what?
Yeah, to the catalog.
So it's up to the publisher. Normally, it depends on your use case. If you're a live sports event, you will start producing audio and video for one camera, and you may never change the tracks that you produce until the end. However, maybe midway through the sports event, you have an overhead camera and you want to, that's now available. You can update the catalog to describe the availability of the new tracks. So the catalog only gets updated when track availability or attributes change. And there's no requirement to update it if nothing's changing.
I think I meant when we decide to add new tracks, like for the init, video init track. Yeah, I think we added a video init track this time, right? There's a PR for that. And how can we decide whether or not to add a new track or to leverage the existing track for transferring?
For init segments?
Yeah.
So you would first of all decide how you want to communicate your init segments. We have 3 proposed ways to do it in the catalog as base 64 as an init track or as an object property. So you decide which one you want to use. And then the next question is, how often is that init going to change? If it's static for the life of the stream, which is most media, then you would only define it once, whether it's in a track or in a track property or in the catalog. But if it's going to change midway through the track, then you can't put it as base 60. Well, you could put it as base 64 in the catalog and just update the catalog. So all 3 mechanisms have the ability for mid-track initialization changes. And you have the freedom to choose which one is more convenient for you.
Oh, I see. So
Okay, no, I'm sorry. We're out of time. We have to take this offline. Thank you. Thanks, Will.
Okay.
There's been a productive thing in the Zulip about privacy, so you should take a look at that. Minghui, go ahead.
Martin, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you share my sliders? Oh.
You did not submit slides, did you? Oh, yes, you did. Sorry. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Hi everyone. I'm Jiang Minghui from the XQuick Dev group. Today I will share our MOQ production experience at Alibaba Group and introduce some new ideas. Okay, next slide. We have employed MOQ in some production scenarios, Taobao voice search, uh, cloud rendering game, Taobao live digital human, and Alipay AI assistants. We are also integrating MOQ into A app and Queen app and some new scenarios. Next slide. Okay. Why we choose MOQ instead of WebSocket or WebRTC? In short, Quick have nicer performance. Quick give us no hit of line blocking, zero RTT, pluggable CC, and MOQ as a flexible media level abstraction on the top. Okay, next slide. Yeah. In the scenarios of Taobao voice search, MOQ versus WebSocket, connection latency reduced by 75% on the Android and 64 reduced on iOS. Next slide. Yeah. In other scenarios, cloud rendering digital human MOQ versus WebRTC. The first frame P19 latency cut by over 50%. Next slide. Yeah. And in Alipay AI assistance, over 50% reduction in both connection latency and average interaction delay compared to the traditional WebRTC pipeline. Next slide. Yeah. After tuning XQuick with GCC, MOQ, and WebRTC show almost the same latency, about 107 and versus 104 milliseconds. CC and at the transport layer works well, but CC alone is not enough for us. The sender still needs feedback from the application layer to adapt media quality. This is the motivation for our new draft. Next slide. Yeah. Now our MOQ implementation is open source. XQuick on GitHub. We have participated in the MOQ interop runner with draft 14 and draft 5 is stably running in the real production, and draft 16 is also working in progress. Next slide. Okay. This slide shows the gap. On the left, transport layer feedback only sees the packet, and on the right side, we want to know more information like delivery status, arrival timing, and buffer level. This is the information from the application layer. This is what we are currently missing in the MOQ. Next slide. Okay, why does the feedback from application layer improve performance? If there is no feedback, the sender keeps sending at the max bit rate. When the network gets worse, it leads the serial stalling. With feedback, the receiver tells the sender what is happening in the network, and the sender reduced the bit rate to match the network condition. Stalling goes away. Okay, next slide. we have do some experiments to validate our thought. We run some controlled experiments with video streaming to validate this. Both group, you can see this slide to know the whole to know the whole experience pipeline. Both group use MOQ, but the only difference is whether use feedback or not. Yes. Thanks to the NRTC from the Ant group for contributing this experiment. Okay, next slide.
We have a question from Mo.
Clarifying question. When you say feedback, do you mean end-to-end feedback from the original publisher all the way to the end subscriber, or do you just mean hop by hop feedback on one single quick connection? What kind of feedback do you mean? From the very source to the very end, or just on one connection?
From the source to the end, from source to the end. Yeah.
All the way. Okay.
Okay. The next slide. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. This slide shows our test data under different bandwidth limits. The feedback group always shows higher FPS and much lower store rate. You can see the details on this slide to know our experience. Okay, next slide. Okay, this experiment tests our feedback draft in the packet loss scenarios. At the 50% pack loss, the max frame interval drops from about 3 seconds to under 1 second. The worse the network, the more feedback helps to improve performance. Okay, next slide. Another experiment we test is we try to improve the performance of the AI inference audio generation. You can see this slide to know the whole pipeline of this experiment. In this case, the upstream source is AI inference. Like you can see VLLM and MOQ server. Okay, in this experiment, the MOQ client sends delivery feedback to the MOQ server, which can sign the inference pipeline to switch different video generation quality. Like you can switch between the high quality, medium quality, or the low quality levels. Then the inference can output a different video generation quality. Oh, next slide. Okay. In this experiment, we have two key findings. In good network condition, feedback at 0 overheat, and but in the bad conditions, 80 milliseconds delay plus 5% packet loss, feedback give us 33 higher FPS and 33 fewer stalls. Next slide. Yeah, so we propose draft MOQ multimodal feedback. This draft, this key design is to add a new MOQ feedback track to carry real-time feedback reports. It provides more information about per object delivery status, reserve timestamp deltas, and optional metrics like playback buffer headrooms or something else. It serves both the application and the CC algorithms. Next slide. Okay, you can see this is the whole loop of our feedback draft. This is straightforward. You can see the receiver reports object status and buffer level, while feedback track the sender use it in the two directions. Upward, the application layer adjusts the bitrate, resolution, or some inference parameters like CFG or something else. Trunk size, yes. On the downward, the CC algorithms gets extra signal like loss rate and buffer level, and then do some adjustment. This forms a closed loop. Next slide. Okay. Our new draft can work with other extending draft like quick receive timestamp. We hope this draft can bridge the information gap with the transport layer and the application layer. Next slide. Okay, this is summarize. To summarize, we shared our MOQ production experience and experiment data at Alibaba, and we proposed MOQ multimodal feedback to add application layer feedback. There are still some open questions listed in this slide. We look forward to your feedback and discussion. You can also contact us via email and Slack. Okay, thanks, and thanks, Marty. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Minghui, for being on time. Good presentation. I do want to say as chair that with the way we're doing things these days, if you're interested in this feature and think it should be in MOQ, the best thing you can do is start contributing to their GitHub on that, or commenting on that draft, and most importantly, implementing it. If we get interop on things, it's more likely to make it the standard. With that, I'm going to close the queue quite soon, so enter it if you want to be, and if people can be brief, that's great. Mo.
This is interesting. I think a lot of us feel that there will be need for app level feedback. The challenge, though, is in MOQ. It's inherently wanting to be large fan out, large distribution. So in your testing, have you tried many different subscribers giving feedback to a single sender, single publisher, or are you aggregating the feedback in any kind of way?
No, we just the primary test on this draft. We only use the single client and single server, but we can we can supply more scenarios of this draft. Yeah. So thanks.
Jahid, so I kind of like asking the same question perhaps. The thing is, like, you have a receiver side bandwidth estimator, and I'm expecting you have a sender side bandwidth estimator as well. And I have two questions. One is basically, how do you on the receiver side, how do you do the bandwidth estimation? And in the server side, sender side, how do you like put all the estimations together from different clients? Kind of like what Mo was asking. But how do you do receiver side estimator? Let's focus on that one. If you go to the previous slide, you have something called, you are sending receiver side bandwidth estimation. One more perhaps. One more back. Yeah, estimated bandwidth. Receiver reports estimated bandwidth. How you're calculating that?
Okay. We have integrating the quick receiver timestamps this draft to know the some transport layer information. Yeah. So we can know the real time network condition, and then we have a policy to estimate the real time bit rate, yeah, and decide the policy. Yeah. So
okay, I would like to understand a bit more, but maybe I'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Zahid. Victor.
Yeah. You can talk to me later. Yeah.
Victor Vasiliev, Google. We, in our implementation, we have a feature which is similar to this. The key differences is that we don't put it on a track. We do it as a hub by hub extension. And the second difference is that is the format. Our format is we only send positive acknowledgements and we only send the time delta between the expected receive time and the actual receive time. So for a long while I was trying to, we've never submitted this as a draft, but I do wonder if we can somehow figure out if what we implemented is compatible with what's in that draft and whether we can converge.
Yeah, we can do more connections after the meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, Victor, I think writing something down would be helpful. Alan?
Thank you so much for presenting this, bringing this work. I think it's great. I'd love to hear at some point, like what when you say deployed at scale, like this may be, for all I know, the biggest mock deployment in the world. So we'd love to hear some of the numbers. But I'm curious if you can roll all the way back toward the beginning of your presentation, if you could just talk a little bit more about the application use case scenarios that you had there. I'm particularly curious about kind of the one you mentioned, which was like user to or human to computer AI. Because that's another area that I think, like mock could be a very good fit. Just explain kind of a little bit more what the application is that you're using.
Okay. We observed some new video generation. They need the real time in display. Yeah. So you have the latency. The latency is the key. And they need to the higher FPS and the lower end-to-end latency. So when you have the network condition difference, you need to know this change in the network condition quickly. So we have to adjust the inference framework parameters quickly between the in the one single request or between the different requests. So it can.
I think I get that part. I was sort of asking like one higher level, like what is the application like? I talk to my agent and I'm like, generate me some video, and so it's like dynamically generating video on the fly and then streaming it back to me. Is that the use case?
Yeah. Just
okay,
like that.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ming-Hui. Once again, nice presentation and good job writing up in a draft. That is the right way to propose changes at this point to the protocol. Okay, Suhas, you're up.
Hi everyone. Martin, I'm not seeing my deck yet. Maybe there's a lag. Okay, I can see that one. Hi, I'll be talking about why we want to do MOQ or QMUX. QMUX is a new draft or new work that QUIC working group has taken up. This presentation is basically trying to say why do you want to run MOQ or when do you want to run MOQ or TCP, especially when QUIC or UDP is unavailable for whatever reason. And we know QMUX is basically a multiplexing layer that provides QUIC-like stream abstractions or TCP or TLS. Next slide, please.
You have slide control.
Cool. Thanks. The idea here is that MOQ is designed to work with QUIC and which runs over UDP, but there are certain scenarios where UDP or QUIC might not work. Like UDP is less, QUIC is more blocked than UDP in general, but some of the use cases like enterprise firewalls or mobile carrier restrictions, some middle boxes can drop the UDP packets because they would not want to support it, or there can be some rate limiting scenarios. In all these cases, we might not have MOQ or QUIC just work. And without a TCP fallback, MOC applications simply won't work in these environments. And this limits kind of adoption and reach of MOC-based application, especially in the enterprise and some of the examples I kind of talked about. And we need kind of way to support something that would allow this to happen. So the proposal here is that we want to run QMux as in the layer that's over which MOC is running, and QMux kind of provides a multiplexing layer, and it sits between your MOC application and your TCP/TLS stack. And the main thing here is that QMux is kind of a polyfill which provides a notion for bidirectional streams for control messages, unidirectional streams in MOC, for example, for data delivery, and a kind of transport parameters to configure your connection, which the way you would do in QUIC, and also flow control through some parameters like max data frames. The key insight here is that the applications that coded against QUIC APIs work unchanged. This would be critical so that we have one code base that can work where in UDP friendly and QUIC friendly environments as well as not so friendly environments. I think this kind of summarized. I'll just go skip on this one. One thing I like to say on this slide is that even though there are good benefits of running MOC or QUIC, but we also need to kind of understand that there are some trade-offs as well, which is head-of-line blocking. The nice thing of QUIC is that you have parallelism with streams. That will go away. Again, we have been doing a lot of work within the MOC working group to reduce the amount of RTTs that we need to do. But if you go to the QMux, it will increase the RTTs. It might add additional 2 RTTs compared to how we would set up using just or QUIC. And we lose some of the good features of QUIC, like connection migration and those things. We need to keep that in mind. But the idea here is that you'll have probably it'll end up not being able to send anything versus with some penalty you're able to have the MOC application work is what is the goal here. And if we do MOC over QUIC QMux, how we basically take there's an easy mapping. We have the request streams, which we use the bidirectional streams in QMux, and we have unidirectional streams for data, which is what we use for sending as data streams. And for all the control stream data, which is for setup messages, it would be like stream number 0. And anything you want to do with flow control and other things, we have these parameters that talks about how do you want per connection level max amount of data that you can send, and for stream level you have maximum stream data parameter, and also to do the flow control on the number of streams you have a max stream parameters. So basically what it's saying is that there's quite a bit of direct one-on-one mapping between how we want to use MOC over normal QUIC versus QMux. So there's not much kind of an application needs to change to support QMux and underneath. Having said how QMux works and why it might be helpful, the challenge comes here is that like when you want to use MOC or QMux, MOC can run over QUIC or it can run over web transport, and we can have different MOC versions and we can have different QMux versions. How does the client and server identify each other when they're running? Currently, the draft specifies a straightforward, simple idea, which is like, we don't care. At the MOC application layer, we just use the MOC ALPN, like MOC 16 or MOC 17 that identifies a draft version. The client basically sends the client hello message with this ALPN, and if the server is fine, if it's a QMux-based server, basically they do establish QX transport parameters. That's how you know that there's a QMux being set. And once the QMux session setup works, you end up setting like a MOC session is ready. Here the thing is that yes, you need to kind of establish a TCP or TLS connection to see if on the other side is QMux or not, and we need to kind of figure out what kind of happy highballs things you would want to do to not reduce your connection setup latency. Something like, should we do both your UDP as well as your TCP in parallel, and once something gets connected, wait for a while before you totally give up on the attempt on the other ones. But so those are some of the things kind of we need to think about and provide recommendations for someone who would want to use MOC or QMux. Let me skip this slide. But there is an alternative proposal here, which is basically inspired. But the problem with the previous ALPN proposal is that it does not let you negotiate anything over the QMux. It assumes somehow the QMux works magically. If the server and clients are on different versions, it might just fail. To kind of alleviate that problem, one, we have two alternate proposals here. These are not in the draft, but this came over discussion with a few folks around. The first proposal is kind of how web transport kind of upgrades itself to from H3 ALPN to the next level, saying these are the available protocols that I would like to use, and say which MOQ version you use. Why don't we kind of bring the same design to the QMux negotiation as well? So what this basically says is that at the TLS layer, if you're running MOQ or QMux, at the TLS layer, you say I support QMux version 1. And in the next available protocols in the QX parameters, you say, oh, I support MOQ 16 and 17. That's how you can know that you're supporting QMux 1 and MOQ 16 or 17. The same way if you're doing it over web transport, you start with at TLS layer, your QMux, and at the next available protocols, it will be H3. From the H3, the next WT available protocols will say what MOQ version you're using. This kind of is inspired by the web transport design. Rohan, I have one more slide, and I'll get back to you if that's okay. On the other hand, the other way to solve the same ALPN problem is that you can define one ALPN at the TLS that kind of has combination of the MOQ version and the QMux version. This kind of provides you a way to say my TLS layer ALPN to kind of clearly identify what MOQ and MOQ version, QMux version that you support, but it can have a version explosion, especially when we are in the draft versions. Maybe if once we are standardized, it might not be a problem, but you still have this problem of version explosion here. Then I can skip this one. Okay, the question to the group is that what does people think about having to work on this draft and invite people to kind of help make this happen? And we have seen some early deployments. Usually the challenge with early deployments is that the private deployments, they kind of go do it. And when IETF proposes something, it becomes really hard to kind of change. So we kind of need to do something early so that we can give recommendations to the implementers who are doing MOQ or QMux to kind of say how do we support this application. Yeah, open for questions, please.
All right, I had to lock the queue because Suhas did not leave a lot of time for comments, so most of you are not going to make it, but Rohan, go ahead.
Hi, Rowan May. So apologies that I've not been super closely following this, but so I'm an implementer. I want to be able to make sure that some MOQ traffic gets over. It's only going to be able to go over TCP port 443. Why would I want to use QMux instead of web transport with HTTP2?
Oh, web transport or HTTP2 should be totally fine. If that's I don't think so. This would avoid if that's your deployment. But that also requires you to have HTTP2 server on the other side. But if the QMux is the deployment you have on the server side, this will give a natural way to move to that.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Suhas. So a couple of things. One, I think that there's probably be more talk about how to do QMux version negotiation in the QUIC session. So probably people should come there. I think I'm firmly on team. There's only a MOQ ALPN, and it tells you what QMux version you're running rather than having multiple layers. Also, I think most of what's in this draft could probably be consolidated into the MOQ draft into a very short amount of text, which just explains that we're going to use MOQ. You can use MOQ over QMux and how you do that. Clear the timing there, since we don't know if QMux is going to finish before we will, or if we want to reference it normatively, or if we would need to have a separate draft that says how to do that if the ordering goes MOQ then QMux, then MOQ over QMux.
Perfect.
Anyway,
sounds good, Alan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Suhas. Many people were in the queue and didn't get an opportunity. Please use Zulip or the list or contact Suhas directly. Next up is Mo, who's going to talk about LOC.
I'll try to catch us back up. This should be relatively simple.
Wait a minute, sorry. guess.
This is the lock media format, overhead container. The changes in version 02, there was some large editorial, but there was peppered everywhere. The extensions were changed to properties to align with MOQ-T, and variants were replaced with the new VI64 variant. This is the old version. This is not the one that you uploaded.
There's a lag in data tracker. I approve slides. It doesn't show up. Sorry.
Okay, I'll try to remember the changes. All right, so the major substantive change was moving the metadata location. We had an agreement to move most of the metadata into the MOQ payload so that it's opaque to the relays. However, on the next slide, we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail, why there's actually a split now between two sets of properties, public and private, one that lives in the payload, one that lives in the MOQ header. We added a timescale property. It was called timebase before, but we renamed timescale to align with some other APIs to give the scale of the timestamps. We removed the capture semantics from timestamps because you can use it for presentation or anything else. Retained start codes, and we added a lot of information about secure objects integration and the security considerations. Okay, so the big change was moving metadata from the MOQ header extensions into the MOQ payload. So this is the old version. The MOQ header extensions map directly to the loc header extensions, and the MOQ payload mapped directly to the loc payload. So it was a nice, clean, simple mapping. And both of the payloads were the exact bytes that you get out of the encoded audio video chunks from web codecs. What we moved to in 02, there are still some public properties that are a subset of the MOQ header properties, but the majority of them are expected to be in the lock private properties, which now live in the MOQ payload. And the lock payload follows its private properties. So now you have the MOQ payload not being the exact encoded audio video chunk anymore, but it's both private properties and the payload. So there's some discussion on that if people want to look at the issue. There's a little bit more detail in there about why that split was necessary and which specific properties we think could be private or public. The time scale is very straightforward. It's a new property that just provides the denominator of the timestamp. So 48,000 for audio, typically 90,000 for video. If you don't specify it, we default back to the original interpretation, which is microseconds. It could be on the track, or individual objects can override it. The open issue is the major one. Colin already addressed yesterday. The track properties that can't be authenticated or encrypted. There needs to be a solution to that, probably in secure objects, and then lock will just follow that solution. There's some editorial things about registry collisions. We'll clean that up. Luke brought up a question about lock outside of MOQ. I thought we agreed that that was out of scope, but if anybody has a different view or opinion, please chime in on that issue. Again, registry editorial things, web codecs long lingering issue, and finally from last night, we realized why people have grief when you encode a variant with not minimal encoding. So that's what we were doing with the frame marking extension, and that caused some confusion. So maybe we'll revert that and just do explicit lengths and not try to overload the VI64 and keep it minimal length. All right, that's it. That's just.
Well done, sir. Anyone in the queue? All right, let's move right into there's like 6 clicks I have to make. Give me a second. We're going to move right into the filters discussion.
let me make sure this is the updated one because
It's
that will make a
version
big
1.
difference.
It's version 1. You don't have slide control yet. I have to give it back to you.
Go to the last slide. Let me see what it is. I'll tell you if it's right or wrong.
Well, I gave you slide control, so there's 13 slides.
Okay, that's the right upload.
There's nothing to be done anyway because me and Echo's not syncing.
Okay, yeah, no, this is the right one. Okay, so filters. This is a new PR, 1518. The old PR 1401 was much larger, and the feedback was let's try to reduce the scope, make it more manageable to merge. So we did. The major changes in bold there, removing the location filters and the group filters. So we already have filters in the current MOQ-T. The subscription filters, we renamed them to subscription location filters. And of course, the forward flag is also basically a filter. So we already have some versions of filters. This adds the new range filters and the track filter. We also simplified some things by removing some of the parameters, max tracks deselected, and the equivalent of it for the setup option and the parameter option. We improved the wire encoding. Some Delta encoding enthusiasts got a hold of it. And we clarified a lot of the interactions between other parts of the spec, like how to manage subgroup closing and things like that. Okay, so setup options, we removed one of them, and the only thing that's left now is max filter ranges, and that's changed to be a total across all ranges and all parameters. It used to be for each individual filter type. Now it's across all filters. Max track selected is still the same. We removed deselected. The range filters, the major change here was adding and sets. So the range filters, again, they were reduced to only these 4. We removed the group filter and the location filter. And we added this and set to all of these 4. The and set allows you to basically do and or combinations of all of these filters. Before, the design team didn't want the full complexity of and or sets, but then some other issues came up later where relays that aggregate these subscriptions need to be able to express and or sets. Even if a client doesn't have to express it, the relays end up having to express that to avoid some DOS vectors, to avoid pulling in too many objects because then it can't express the filter succinctly. And it's actually a really simple change, not much text at all. You have this parameter and set, this value and set in every parameter, and for the same values of and set, you and all of those in that same set, and then you or all of those groups of and sets at the very end. So it's a very simple. Alan, you have a question?
Sorry, there's an AV lag here. So to be clear, before these were single value parameters, because there was never a need to express, you wouldn't have subgroup filter twice in the same block because it was just an or of everything. So having 2 of them didn't mean anything. But now they're multi-valued. So I have every distinct, maybe you can explain.
So the echo up here is horrible.
Do you understand my question?
Well, yeah, the echo is bad at the front here. Well, it's already gotten past the scroll there. He was asking about.
Can you repeat it quickly?
It was something about a single value versus multiple values, and if something changed
Is each
there.
filter parameter now multi-valued? Like you could have the same subgroup filter parameter twice with different and set numbers.
Yes, you can have the same parameter. Yes, before each parameter, except the priority, the property filter used to allow itself to repeat. Now they all allow themselves to repeat with different and set values. If you have the same and set value, then it'd be a protocol violation, but different values is allowed, except the property filter. It's a combination of and set and property type that make it unique, and it's a violation if you repeat those 2 identically. Okay. Some examples. The motivating factor for most of these filters was be able to do keyframe scrubbing. You want object ID 0. There's a simple, easy way to do that. The bold numbers here are what we actually care about. So object ID 0, this shows how to encode it with an object filter. Just put 0. You want a video base layer. That's subgroup ID 0 typically. That's what lock specifies. So you just put a subgroup filter for 0. If you want 2 enhancement layers, 1 and 3, there are 2 temporal layers. Then you put a subgroup filter on subgroup 1 for a count of 1 and subgroup 3 ending at 3. And we delta encode those. So those red numbers, slash them through and minus the previous one, you get the delta encoded version in black. The property type filter, the key thing to show there is that we have to add the property type before the values. And that also shows where no end, you just omit the end. The last example is if you want to do the OR, you change right after length is the and set. So you just put 2 different numbers for the and set, and you'll end up with an OR of those 2 things. So you may want across, temperature and humidity, temperature higher than 30 or humidity higher than 50 instead of anding them together. You can also remove any of these filters just by having a length of 0. That's used in a request update. And the ranges can express all of these operations, equal to, less than or equal to, exclusively between, inclusively between. Okay, then the track selection filter. This was one that generated a lot of comments, and thanks a lot to Alan and Ian for raising a lot of really good points that helped us refine this. If you're familiar with SQL, this is like the same as doing select top in SQL. So it's selecting the top in tracks over an entire namespace, and it's selecting them based on the values of a property that you specify. So you specify the property type, and it will find the highest values for that property type across all of the tracks in the namespace. You can combine this track filter with all of the other filters too. So all the prior filters that we had, and the subscription location filters, and the forward flag is the ultimate filter that disables all of these. When you combine all those filters, the key thing is that the track filter always runs first in order to help with scalability. Explain why. This was a change that was requested to allow the relay to run a single track filter for all subscribers of that namespace one time at the ingress of the relay, instead of having a track filter per subscriber customized to their needs. Question?
Hello. So I have a question about the track filter. So this is for the end-to-end or hop-to-hop?
For the end, what?
It's for the end-to-end or hop-to-hop, like original publisher and to the client, or it's just a relay with the.
It's to the original publisher. You subscribe to a namespace only to your nearest relay, your edge relay.
Yeah.
But then that edge relay will go through its network, and we actually recommended in the latest PR that relays should aggregate and upstream these requests, all of these filters, including the track filter, so that they all propagate back up to the eventual source, to the original publisher. And so across the entire relay chain, you end up with those filters propagated across all the relays. Okay,
so the original publisher can know all the properties and can do the filter, right?
Well, typically the original publisher will know its own properties, so it can self-filter the range filters and the location filter and all those other filters. The track filter is a comparison across other tracks. So the track filter can only be done at the edge relay or its directly connected publishers. all the original publishers that directly connect to one edge relay, that relay will run the track filter across all of them. They can't run it themselves because they only have one track. They're always going to be the top one.
Oh, let me try to understand it. So there may be multiple original publishers, and there is one relay, and they pass all the filter to the original publishers, and they return. How next happen?
The conceptual model is you're doing this over a namespace, right? So let's say you have 100 publishers in this namespace,
Yes.
and they're all publishing. Let's say they're all publishing to the same edge relay. They happen to all be co-located on one edge relay. That means that edge relay has 100 connections to these publishers directly. It will run the track filter. It will not propagate the track filter to those original publishers because they're only one. If you said, if all of the subscribers that wanted to filter those 100 publishers said, I want the top one,
No, yeah.
then that edge relay in front of all those 100 publishers would say, I'm going to look at all of these publications and I'm going to pick the one that has the highest metric. Let's say the metric was audio level. Who's speaking the loudest? So it'll look at all of those 100 publishers and it will pick the one that has the highest audio metric.
Yeah.
It can't propagate that filter to the publisher because the publisher doesn't see everybody else.
Yes, that's true. So, what control message should be like?
It's in subscribe namespace. The track filter, when you subscribe to the namespace to say you're interested in this all tracks in this entire namespace, you can add the track filter parameter. And in that parameter, you specify, let me just go on one slide and there it is. So the track filter parameter is in subscribe namespace or updates to it. And you specify the property that you want to watch, audio level, humidity, temperature, whatever. You specify the property that you want to watch and how many tracks you want to get back. So the top N, I want, N equals 2 or 3 or whatever. And there's also a timeout parameter to say if one of the publishers has not delivered objects within this amount of time, don't consider it in the top N anymore. So those are all the parameters that the track filter has.
Okay, so really.
All right, I think we need to move on. Let's go back to the presentation.
Thank you so much.
You can save your questions for the end.
So we removed the max tracks deselected out of this parameter because we now allow relays to purge the old state using publish done anytime they want. So before there was a rigid algorithm of a table dimensioned max tracks deselected deep that the relays and the subscribers had to each maintain. Now the relay is just free to publish done anytime it wants to purge how much ever state it wants. That's a balancing act between if you purge too much state, then you have to republish again. But now it's under relay control and it simplifies the filter. We also added a new error if relays want to protect themselves by saying, you know what, this filter is too complex. I can't upstream this and I don't want to process this much complexity. They can return an error conflicting filters to the subscribe namespace or when they close it out so that they basically just say this is too complex of a filter. We added some diagrams to show the state transitions of this track selection filter. You start off unknown, where the name and alias of the track is not known at all to the subscriber, so you can't forward it any of the track's data. When the track delivers an object that gets it into the top 10, in the top N, then it's considered newly selected and it follows that publish path with a forward equals 1 flag. When it gets promoted, then it goes to the selected state. It's selected in the top N tracks and it's passing the filter at that point. So all of its objects are flowing. If later it gets evicted or demoted by another track, then it drops out of the top N and it goes deselected. It could also drop out because of a timeout. It didn't deliver objects for too long of a time. And so it'll get demoted and drop out. It'll go to the deselected list and the objects there fail to filter, so they're not forwarded anymore. When we go to deselected, the red key changes we made in this version were we do a request update now to notify with a forward equals 0 flag to notify the subscriber that we're no longer forwarding this track. So instead of seeing silence and inferring that the track was deselected, we're sending an explicit control message signal that we're deselecting the track. If the track becomes reselected again because it delivers a higher metric again, then it'll go up to that request update forward equals 1 flow upon reselection, and it's back in the selected state. If it sat in a long time in deselected state and the relay wants to clean up excess old subscriptions, then the relay will publish done that track, and it'll go back up to the unknown state. And of course, no objects can be forwarded when it's unknown. If that track becomes reselected again because it delivers a new object that's in the top end, then it has to go through the newly selected flow and deliver a new publish again. Some other nuances of this are you're allowed to subscribe to a name that is also in that namespace. So if you do a subscribe to a namespace, and then you later also subscribe to a name in that namespace, that overlapping subscription is actually allowed because we call it pinning that one track, regardless of whether or not it's in the top end, you're interested in it. This is a very common use case. For example, in video conferencing, you see the top 4 loudest speakers, but then you want to see one particular speaker, the room that has 20 people in or something. So you pin that room, and then you don't care if it's the loudest or not. You always want it pinned. So you're directly subscribing to that one track. And that's supported. The track filter will never evict that track once you pin it, because it's a permanent subscription. You can also update the parameter for the subscribe namespace. You can change aspects of the track filter. When you change those, they'll have to be reevaluated, and then you'll get new, you could potentially get new publishes for the newly active top end tracks. You could get forward equals 0 request updates for the ones that got deselected. And there's also a track property filter, and that will filter the publish message itself. So if you apply a track property filter, you won't even get the published message, so you won't even be notified of those publishers. So for example, if you had something like codec as one of your track properties, you could say, I'm only interested in senders with an AV1 codec. So then that track property filter will block all of the other codecs from publishing to you. Some other changes, wire encoding efficiency, we delta encoded everything. The property filter was made to look more like the other filters by having multiple of those per property type, so that it can reuse the same parser that all the other range filters used. We clarified a lot of the interactions between subgroup gaps and fetch gaps, what that means when you have filters in place. Added a lot more details to track filter selection and diagrams and how the reselection process works. We added a section I'll mention in a minute about relay protection to avoid DOS attacks. And like you saw in red on the previous slide, we explicitly signal every time we reselect or deselect the track by doing a request update forward equals 0 or 1. So there were some issues brought up about asymmetric attacks because the design of both subscribe namespace and specifically the track filter and some other features like forward equals 0, those features are inherently asymmetric, meaning that the subscriber can ask in a very simple one control message something that triggers a lot of work for the relay that consumes a lot of bandwidth and a lot of compute. So there's a worry that that may be a vector for some asymmetric attacks on the relays. So we added some guidance about how relays can help protect their resources when they see a potential for something like this. This is not going to mitigate everything because these filters and things like forward equals 0 and subscribe namespace itself are inherently asymmetric by design. It's not a side effect. It's not an attack vector. By design, they're intended for a subscriber to request something simple, and the relay does a lot of work to give it back that complex thing. So we can't mitigate all of the asymmetry, but we're giving relays some guidance about when they can detect that something is overloading their resources and how they can escape out of it. So first of all, the relays should propagate all of these filters upstream, should aggregate all what it sees from the subscribers to that namespace, and it should propagate a single filter upstream to its relay network. That way it doesn't have to do the work of pulling all the tracks in and doing the logic and giving it back out, push it all the way back up to the source. There's also cases where if you can't propagate upstream because everybody's directly connected to you, if you have an edge relay that actually has 1,000 publishers directly connected to it, and all those publishers are in the same namespace, then that relay may impose some limits so that it says, you know what, too many publishers on this namespace, the namespace is too large, so it can error out that, that subscription. There's also a new conflicting filters error, so that if all of the filters that are being requested by different subscribers end up causing too many conflicts and making the relay do too much work to aggregate them and propagate them upstream, it can reject them with a conflicting filters error. There's also a prefix overlap existing error, and that was originally intended for a single subscriber trying to overlap on its own subscribed namespace and two subscribed namespaces overlapping each other from a single subscriber. That didn't make any sense, right? But now, with multiple subscribers and the relay trying to aggregate them up, it does make sense, because now you could have two different subscribers that are playing by the rules. I want ABC, track namespace ABC, and the other one wants track namespace AB. When that relay receives those two requests and tries to propagate it upstream, suddenly it's in violation of this namespace overlap problem. And so it can reject those as a set of prefix overlaps, even though that individual subscriber didn't overlap his own prefix, but in aggregate, all the subscribers did. So we're putting in some guidance to relays about how they can protect against these cases. It's not bulletproof, and like I mentioned, there's inherent asymmetry in these capabilities by design. So relays will have to exercise caution when using them. This is the list of all of the issues, and if you go to the PR in 1518, there is a link in the bottom comment of the PR to the GitHub repo that's tracking all of these issues. It's actually tracked in the fork where this PR is being authored. So we believe we've addressed all of these issues, but we'd like to hear from each of the submitters before we close all those out.
All right, we have 7 minutes for questions and comments. Alan?
Okay, thanks, Mo. I did see a bunch of updates got pushed to the PR this morning, but I have not had a chance to read them. So I will be doing so soon and provide feedback, because I know I filed a bunch of those issues. So I did have a few questions that were related, I don't know, which you didn't mention in your presentation. One of them is whether, like right now, it sort of talks about this like deselected state. And we removed the max number, which I think is good. Either like if you're going to do a queue, let the relay determine what that number is rather than letting it be different per subscriber. But I also know that some people have implemented this using a timer instead, which is like, if you get deselected, you just sort of, I'm going to send you a publish done, but I'm going to do it on a delay. And if you get reselected before the delay, I cancel it. So one question is that now the recommendation, or is there no text on it? So I'll just ask my questions, come back to it. You mentioned you mentioned property filters that prevent the publish, and that maybe wasn't in the previous version, so that was new. I haven't seen that before. Self-exclusions are something that came up when I subscribe namespace. I really probably don't ever want my own track, but I think we can handle that in MOQ because it's the same, it's not filter related. And then the last one in security was around limiting recursive, like, do we need the recursive feature of subscribe namespace in this case? Meaning when I subscribe top N, can I limit it just to the particular prefix rather than that prefix and everything below it in the tree? And also, can we limit to a single property per, will limiting it to a single property per prefix meet all the use cases?
Yes, so on those last points out, there's in that section talking about all the things that the relay can do to protect itself. You could respond with the namespace too large if you have your recursion problem. If you don't want the bigger namespace, you can just say this namespace is too large. You have to subscribe to the leaf namespace. I don't think it's good to force that in the spec that nobody could ever do that, but it gives the relays the freedom to do that if they think the namespace is really too large.
Yeah, it's not, you don't always know how big like, I don't know, like I found you in the tree, but I don't know necessarily how many children you have in the tree or how many tracks are in each of those places. So, I mean, I mean, the more we can scope this down and the less the relay has to do. So if you say you can only subscribe to one namespace and it's not recursive and there's only one property per name, like that makes the relay implementation that much simpler. So I don't have to track those n different dimensions of this.
Would you impose that same limitation on subscribe namespace itself, regardless of filters?
I don't know. If, the question is, I'm asking, does it meet the use case? Like, and I kind of think that for subscribe namespace, I'm not sure. I think that we need the recursion there. Anyway, I'm not sure. I don't know. What do we need to do to meet the use cases is the question. The minimal that we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a strong opinion. I tend to lean towards let's not restrict things if we don't have to, and give the relays the tools to restrict things if it wants to, and not ban applications from doing something if it's, you know, semantically meaningful. We're not using an application today in our experiments that go 4 deep into a namespace and then wildcard the top level. But I don't know if another application may want to do something like that.
I would sort of rather go the other way, which is like we scope the minimum thing, and that way we don't have interoperability problems. It's very clear what you can expect from the relay. And then if somebody later is like, no, I desperately need this for this use case, won't work until I do it, then we extend it later. Anyway,
I mean, namespace and name construction is up to the app, and it can work around anything. It can flatten into one name. It can flatten the namespace hierarchy into one big namespace with underscore separated tuples if it wanted to, and put them all in one tuple. So apps can work around it even if we put that restriction if they really want to.
That's true.
Ian?
Ian Sweat, Google. I want to say mostly just thanks for engaging on the issues. It's actually been helpful to have separate issues because there is a fair amount to discuss here. And also I think it feels like on some of them we're making meaningful progress. I have not read the most recent version of the PR because it's no reason, but I will hopefully today on the flight back. But as you can see with the number of issues, there's still, I think maybe we don't have to solve all of them before we land something in the end, but I think probably a good chunk of them need to at least be clarified before we need to solve it. So anyway, but thanks for making good progress and engaging kind of on each one individually. It's been helpful.
Suhas.
Hi, thanks, Mo. Just to refer to Alan's point, I think it's like most of the applications, at least. I'm just trying from our implementation experience. We were able to implement track filter for the active speaker switching use case, and we had an implementation before which was an application-driven metadata track and react to someone whenever someone becomes an active speaker or not, versus the experience that we measured with the relay doing the active speaker switching, and with our initial experiments, it does show that the end user experience is way better than what it could happen in the alternate approach. But having said that, I can kind of tend to agree with Alan that if we can start with not having recursion for filter, maybe that would give a way for implementations to kind of build this functionality and help do the interop. And also, I totally agree with one of the open issues that we had was what would happen if for edge relay where they have multiple publishers, how would you restrict getting all the data with forward equal to 1 for everyone, and having a way for that edge relay to say that conflicting or just too large is a good condition for it to handle. And if I went through all the issues that you have and kind of see that we have provided resolutions, and really like to see how can we go further. Thanks for the work on this one.
Go ahead.
Gurtej from Apple. Actually, I think my questions were asked, but I didn't get the answer. One is that when you said when the deselection happens, there's a publish done. I didn't understand, like, who is doing the publish done?
Let me clarify. When the deselect happens, you notify that there's a request update forward equals 0. So you notify the subscriber that it's not going to get objects anymore. You don't have to publish done because you want to keep the track alias alive. If you run out of resources, you run too much subscription state, then the relay is free to publish done to clean up that state. But typically it would hang on to it for a little bit so that the track may get reselected.
Exactly, because if you do the publish done and new audio starts coming in with like actual voice levels, how would you know about it?
Right. Well, when you publish done, you stop forwarding too.
Yeah.
When you deselect, you stop forwarding.
And then it cannot be selected again once you do that.
No. So this is on the egress of the relay. The egress of the relay is what stops forwarding. He still has to ingress everything. Yes, you don't turn off your ingress because you have to receive the objects to inspect them. You can upstream the filter to avoid inspecting them. But if you're the edge relay, you have to ingress all of those publishers to inspect their objects before you can decide whether or not you're going to egress it towards people.
Okay, and then the Suhas question about like, why is it invalid for two subscribers to have the same filter, the same overlapping filters, and like you would error out from the relay in that case? I think that seems like a valid case.
It is valid. The problem is when the relay receives those two and it wants to propagate it upstream, it cannot propagate that upstream because that's a violation of our rules right now. So it has two choices. It could use the broadest filter and then filter locally when it gets the responses to see which ones go to this one, which ones go to that one. But if the relay thinks that's going to be too much work for it, it's free to reject the subscriptions and say, these are conflicting filters. App, you're in the same namespace. You better be the same app, and you're not playing by the rules that I expect.
I'll ask more questions offline. Thank you.
Yeah, and real quick, for Mingwei's presentation about the Alibaba experiments, one thing you can go back into the previous presentations on this to understand all the use cases for the track filter. One of them is feedback aggregation. So if you had many subscribers, you could aggregate all of the feedback tracks from those subscribers back to a single publisher with a single signal from a large pool of subscriber feedback. So that's
okay. Thank you. Well, nice work. We'll hand the balance of the time to Alan to talk about open issues with the transport draft.
Okay, we'll go ahead and roll. Next slide.
I can give you slide control. I would prefer that.
Oh, really? I like bossing you around. Okay. Do I have slide control?
If you're logged in as you, yes.
I'm not logged in as me. I'm at the room.
All right, let's take a look here. Does the room exist in the participant file? Yes, it is. Look at that.
You've got slides control. Now I see the buttons.
We don't see the buttons.
Okay. Okay, we're trying to start off with a softball. We'll see where we face plant. Okay. So now we have track properties and they go everywhere the track goes, but we realize that they are not, there's nowhere to put them in the response to track status, but they probably should be there. So should we just add a properties field to request OK, even though this is like the only message that would use it, and all the other uses of request OK would just never fill in properties? Does anybody have I'm going to do it unless somebody like gets up and says we shouldn't do it that way. Suhas?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Do you want to get the queue in, or you just want to separate? Okay, all right.
I'm gonna try to fix your mic.
Oh,
Keep going.
okay. Going once, going twice. We're gonna do this. Okay, this one will take longer. Invalid varants and non-minimal encodings. So Victor noted that the new MOQ variant parser now has a tri-state return, which is that you try to parse, you get some bytes, you try to parse it as a variant. So it can succeed, that's good. There is a purely invalid case, which is we have decided that there are, you can have your variant be from 0 to 9 bytes, but it cannot be 7 bytes. Some felt like that was an extension point that we would be able to use in the future. If we made if we required minimal encodings, then a non-minimal encoding would also be an invalid case where you're like, this is just a hard fail. And then there's a third case, which is you don't have enough data from to parse, and so you need to go back. So compared to the QUIC variant parser, which really only had, there were no invalid variants in QUIC. Like either it succeeds or you need more data. There's some, I think there's some desire that we could just go that way and say like every encoding is valid. There's no way to fail. You can only need more data. And so that is sort of what Ian and I would like to move to. Does anybody, okay, there's a queue. Colin Suhas. Hold on.
I'll just stay there. I'm just going to come hook up here with you.
Okay.
So I think I'm pretty strongly opposed to this. It's not a very compelling use case. Our parser has thousands of ways where you instantly, there's an error with the data and it's a session error and you tear down the whole session. That's what should happen if you encounter this value, is it's totally a protocol error and should just be torn down. So I don't view this as hard or difficult to parse in any way. And I know that people are wanting to eliminate any possibility of extensibility has been a goal of many people along this way here, but I don't think we should do that. I think that 640K will be enough for anyone turned out not to be true. You always need an extensibility point, and we should keep this extensibility point, keep that code point that allows us the option of allowing extensibility of some form later. That's my argument for keeping it. But I certainly don't see a very strong argument for needing to not produce an error if you run into it. That's so easy to do. I don't get the problem.
Okay. There's more of a queue.
I mean, do you have any response to that? It's not easy to do, or there is a problem? I mean,
I think there's different software designs, and if you live in a world where you love exceptions, then you just can throw an exception and catch it somewhere else, and then it's not a problem. But I would say at least how easy or hard it is to take something that has no particular failure mode and then turn it into one that does can just multiply. So I agree that's maybe not the most compelling case. However, I don't actually believe that variants are extensible in the way that you think they are.
That's fine.
I would love for you to write down how you plan to make something extensible out of this point, because I don't think there's any that actually work, because we have many, and to say that we don't want the protocol is extensible in many ways, including starting by we now have a new version of MOQ.
I don't want to repeat this argument. We've had this many times, right? We came to this conclusion, and now that decision is being undermined. And our parsers, every single other place, have errors that can happen in invalidated things that cause a protocol error, right? This is just the same as all the evidence.
I'll say the issue's been like the PR merged in draft 17. There's an issue open. There's not been a consensus call. So this is the time to speak up and say that what's in the draft is not, needs addressing. Mo.
I don't have heartburn over excluding 7 bytes, but I do have heartburn over trying to exclude non-minimal encodings. Leave it as a should, but I think there's many cases where applications need the flexibility to support aliased non-minimal encodings.
So, sorry, I think that there were too many negatives in your sentence. You're saying you would prefer to allow non-minimal encoding.
Yes. I want aliasing, or they might not be aliases. They may actually mean different things.
Okay, I don't know that I love that design, but your point is noted.
I agree it's ugly, but most apps are ugly.
Okay. Victor.
I mean, so when we originally discussed the 7-byte variant thing, I agreed that we can ban it if it's not going to become a problem, and then I went to implement it, it was a problem, and then I asked people if they're going to implement it or they're just going to ignore and not error in that case. And I heard some people saying that they might ignore and not shut down the connection, which is a strong indication for me that the 7-byte variant thing is not going to happen. And originally I thought it was fine because there were no compelling reasons. And now this reason, like, it might not be 100% compelling, but it's just like I expect it to be in practice. I do not expect us to ever using the 7-byte extension point in practice. Like those are two. I agree that both of those are relatively uncompelling, but this one is more compelling for me because it's an actual implementation issue.
Victor, do you have a perspective on non-minimal encodings?
Non-minimal encoding, I think it's another error case, and if we're trying to get rid of it, I think we should keep. So one thing I want to important is that I really do not want to be in a situation where I have an implementation which rejects 7-byte variants, and then there are implementations out there that do not, because it means people will test against their interop against those, and then they will ship buggy clients, and then they will attempt to interop with me, and I will have to incur friction from that. So that is my worst case scenario, and that's why I feel like we should either decide that everyone enforces those, or we just don't do this.
Are you going
to? Hey, Alan, I'm getting a little. I'm hearing comments in the chat that you are harder to understand than people like Victor. So I don't know if there's any sort of magic you can do there to sound a little clearer in Tokyo that you figured out regarding placement of the mic, etc. If you can do it though, please do it. Thank you.
I will maybe try to speak more slowly.
Yeah, it also may be possible to mute this mic. I'm not sure. I was just going to say that I'd like to get a decision on the non-minimal encoding if we can at least get that done now. And I think as an individual, I'm biased towards not erring out in those cases, but I just want to call out for the work group that there are currently 9 different ways to represent 0. So maybe we like that, maybe we don't. But yeah, it'd be good to get it moved because there's currently a PR open that was going to change it. So I think sometimes had to.
I wrote a PR that said you must use minimal and must error otherwise, but then.
The more I thought about it, the more I wasn't really sure that actually was a good idea. I don't know.
Same. Okay, maybe let's separate these two things. I only heard people speak to allowing non-minimal encodings. Does anybody want to speak for requiring minimal encodings? Christian.
Well, actually, my argument is different. We are using the new variant in places where we used the QUIC variant before. The QUIC variant do not have any requirement of minimal encoding. If we make that requirement, we are going to change a bunch of code flows and get everybody in trouble. So I would rather not do that.
Okay, yeah, that is what I was trying to express on this slide that I think Colin was trying to speak on the other side of, but I agree with you.
I'm willing to fold my original position, just to be clear.
Okay, Suhas.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on this one, other than I saw 2 presentations this week that kind of both lock and also secure objects that showed concerns with having not having a minimal encoding support. I just want to make sure that we need to somehow settle this. I'd give recommendations for those to drafts on how to address those issues, along with what we do with MOQ transport.
Okay, but you personally don't have an opinion on either way? You just want an answer?
I just want an answer for the 2 issues which I see is real issues, and somehow we need to kind of find an answer. I'm okay with it.
Okay, Martin, do?
Yeah, I would just like to comment as an individual that these 2 questions are kind of related because they kind of come to the same point, which is, do we want to have tripartite state in our variant encoder or not? With our particular implementation, it would be great if we did not have tripartite state. So let's not restrict the variant length.
Okay. Can I ask you to put your chair hat back on? And my job is to reflect the consensus of the working group in the document. So do you have a way of judging the consensus of the working group in this case?
We could do a show of hands if people want, but I mean, has anyone spoken up for, I don't think that anyone has said anything about the non-minimal in favor of restricting encoding length. I guess there's one person who stated a like wants to preserve the 7-byte restriction. We could do a show of hands if you would like. Or would anyone else like to speak in favor of the 7-byte restriction, the 7-byte?
Colin is coming back up tonight.
Trying to figure out it.
Okay.
So just about, I thought we were talking about the minimal encoding, not the 7-byte thing. Okay. So maybe it seemed there was some cross between which one we were talking about. And on the one, if we're going, so if we're not going to say that you must encode in the minimal length, which is perfectly fair to do, I think that we need to just take the next portion of the conversation here to be clear of this. That mean when you send numbers on, they must be the same as the publisher sent them to you. Do you have to preserve the encoding of them? I think that's what that was the case Mo was making for it, arguing. And I mean, that's that means in your caches and everything, when you save all these things, if an object ID if it was 0 coded one way versus 0 coded another way, you have to keep that. I'm fine with us going that way, but I mean, what I'm saying is we have to get clear on that decision.
Okay, we talked about this a little bit in secure object.
Yeah.
And in as much as like that variant appears in a block that's fed into your AAD, it darn well better be the same.
But that means that every relay has to preserve it all the way along, including the way it caches.
When it's in the immutable block, that's true. Now, I don't know if Mo.
Well, let's talk about group ID.
So,
I'm sorry.
A couple comments here as an individual. So, first of all, not all variants are generated by the original publisher, right? You have track aliases which are very specifically local. So it's neither here nor there to say like, oh, it's got to be preserved from the original publisher. Regarding secure objects, I mean, to muddy the waters further to bring in that whole subject, but I think a very simple solution would be just expand those to 64 bits for AAD computation purposes.
No, but the question I'm trying to ask that we're here is nothing to do with secure objects. Pretend it doesn't exist. Okay.
Okay.
Like, let's just take things that do pass along end to end, right? Like object ID. Do we need to, so right now the draft says you should encode those minimally. It doesn't say must, and it doesn't say anything else. And I think what we're proposing here, what Mo was saying is, no, those get used for other things. Other people, Christian made arguments made it for other things. That's good. But is the alternative text to they must be minimally encoded be, if you receive them from somewhere, you must transmit them in the same form you received them, because that's the alternative as far as I can tell to meet the use cases we were just talking about.
I don't think that's the only alternative. I think
okay, fair enough. Yeah,
I think the other alternative is like, for example, Martin was saying like, then you can't build applications like Mo, you can't use the variant length bits as part of you need to have an explicit field rather than trying to make assumptions about that. Or for something like secure objects, you say like all variants get expanded to 64 bits before they go into the hash or whatever. So that's another option, but I don't like the idea of having to preserve the encoding. That sounds nuts.
I mean, I thought so, but that's where I thought we were going. That's what I thought the consensus calls the chairs were about to make was, and I wanted to be clear what we were trying to decide to close this, because it would be great, as I'm with Ian, it would be great to close this issue.
Okay, well, there's a queue. I had actually we did manage to face plan on the second slide here. I do have other stuff I would love to talk about.
Alan, would you just like me to do a show of hands?
Do you want to just do a show of hands?
I have a proposal before we do a show of hands.
Sure.
The classic IETF guidance is senders be very conservative in what they send and receivers be very lenient in what they accept.
Yep.
So if you're the parser of this accept anything, accept the non-minimal encodings, and try to preserve that on. If you're the sender, don't expect anybody to preserve your encodings and use the safest, most conservative minimal encoding. So senders should always encode them minimally, but not rely on being preserved. Receivers should allow in non-minimal encoding and should preserve it if they can.
Okay, so the binary choice I'm going to present here is, should we change the current
hang on, please.
minimal
Martin,
encoding?
Martin, somebody else was in queue here.
Okay.
So briefly, Mo, sometimes Pastel was wrong. This is one of those times. The third way is that you can have, that if you have a canonical way to express things for comparison and for signing, that you can use one of those ways. Thanks.
Okay. There's
Okay,
Christian.
no,
on
this
the-
text editor is killing me. So
My
there's gonna be
advice
typos.
is that we have a lot of history with canonical encodings, and that history is not good.
Yes, I'm a Christian.
Okay.
And
I'm
so
gonna
and
start
so
this so we don't-
preserve the encoding is the best practice by all
All right,
means.
if you've not already joined the meeting with Medico with Let Client, now would be a great time to do it. So this is a question on whether we should change the should to a must. Sorry for the typos, but this text editor was killing me. The choice one is the status quo in the draft, which is that one should use minimal encodings. The alternative here is to change it to a must. That would be a yes vote. All right, things are starting to stabilize. Does anyone need more time? Okay, I'm going to call it good at four people in favor of making it a must, 22 against. Can anyone not live with it being a should? And if so, would you like to approach the mic and say so? Martin?
This is not, I cannot live with, but why do you even have a should? People are going to do the small thing because it's
Don't confuse the question, Martin.
We copied it from QUIC, dude.
Yeah, whatever.
if you don't like the should, if you don't like a should, you could file an issue against it. Alan loves when people file new issues. Okay. Do you have the signal you need, Alan?
I do accept the 7 bytes, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a thread on the list, and I'll ask the chairs to.
Well, we have 2 minutes. Do we want to have?
There's no way it's resolving in 2 minutes.
We can do a show of hands in 2 minutes.
Okay, you want to do another show of hands?
Sure.
Please stop the timer so we can read the poll.
Oh, I actually typed that correctly for once. Okay, so this question is asking whether we should, currently in the draft, 7-byte variants are disallowed. Yes, Mo.
Clarification, is there any side effect of this that it pushes a 64 out to 10 bytes or anything?
No,
Is there any side effect of this?
The 7-byte code point is currently disallowed for extension,
but it doesn't-
accessibility purposes.
Doesn't impact any of the other encodings, won't
No.
extend anything.
Must with 2 T's. Like English.
Okay, does anyone need more time? People are, okay, there we go. Okay, I'm going to close it in 10 seconds unless someone hollers very quickly. Just turn on your mic and say so if you need more time. Okay, I'm going to close it. 15 people in favor of yes, 5 and no. We have 1 minute remaining. Would anyone, because anyone cannot live with any outcome here. Okay, no one's speaking up. That one's a little closer. You might want to take it to the list, Alan, but I think that's a useful signal that can inform.
I will put a thread on the list if people want to add additional.
All right, excellent.
written.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. I didn't think we were going to.
Hey, I've got a slide. The next one will terminate in less than 30 seconds because it's a 30-second editorial bike shed. Do people want to take VI64 or V64? I already picked one. Somebody opened a PR.
What did you pick?
It's currently VI64 for variable integer.
Can anyone not live with VI64? Say so now.
Huh?
Okay, no one said anything. Go with it. All right, thanks, Alan. I didn't think we'd faceplant on Varens, but there you go. Our next interim meeting is March 30th at 1630 UTC. We didn't have time for a demo today of server-side ABR from the folks at Disney. Tentatively, it is planned for the 30th. So those of you who might be interested in that, I encourage you to try to attend on the 30th. I'm going to put out a call on the list for other agenda items that day. And I will see many of you at the virtual and many others of you at our hybrid interim in London in June, as I announced in the first session. And the rest of you will see in Vienna. Thank you.
Martin, it originally was just I, but then somebody said, well, if I ever wanted to show a composite of like MOQ T over QUIC, then you need to distinguish that like QUICs are I.